Hi friends, Krista here. Thanks for stopping by Books and Jams. It is already halfway through November, which is insanely crazy to me. Next week is Thanksgiving. What? How did we already get towards the end of November? I don't know. But I have a handful of books that I've already read this month. I have 7 books to talk about. And so I wanted to do a little mid-month wrap-up to share with you what I have read and what I'm currently reading. The first 3 books that I'm going to talk about are the ones that I read for Historathon 2.5, which was a 10-day readathon at the beginning of November, hosted by my good friends Amanda from The Curly Reader and Lindsay from Lindsay's Little Library. They had 5 prompts. I only read 3 books, but I think I covered 4 of the different prompts. The question is, can I remember what the prompts are now that I'm sitting here to talk about these books? I'm not sure. But let me just tell you what I did read. Finally, I read a book that has been recommended to me so many times, and that is The Red Tent by Anita Diamant. This is sort of a biblical fiction. We follow Dinah, who is one of Jacob's daughters. Actually, is she his only daughter? I think she's the only one mentioned in the Bible. She might be his only daughter. He had a whole ton of sons from 4 different women. So we follow Dinah, and this really focuses on the women's side of things in biblical times. I wouldn't necessarily call it a retelling or even a biblical fiction, because a lot of what is mentioned in this book is just really not talked about in the Bible. But we do know when Jacob and Rachel and Leah and their crew left Laban's household, we know that Rachel snuck some of the gods, the foreign gods, the gods that they worshipped, their household gods, all of that. She snuck them with her because we know that in the Bible, Laban came chasing after them to get his gods back home. So this does really focus on a lot of that other side of religion. Like Jacob was one of the founding fathers of Christianity, like the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Like that's the Jacob that is Dinah's father. But in the women's tent, the red tent, which is where they would go during their monthly flow, and a lot happened in the women's tent that the men just didn't know about. There was a lot of support and love for each other. They talked about women's matters and these ancient religious gods that they would worship in the women's tent that were separate kind of from the men's religion. I don't know how much of that is straight biblical, but it was interesting to read about. I really did love Dinah and her relationship with her mothers, Leah, her birth mother, but also these other women who she viewed as mother figures in her life. I thought the relationship between all of these women was really beautiful. There is a horrible scene that happens and that is biblical. Dinah had relations with a man from Shechem, and Dinah's brothers avenge her by going and killing all the men in the town. Now in this story, Dinah was in love with that man, and so she kind of leaves her family following that event and goes with her husband's side of the family. So from there on, it's a total imagined story. But I just found it to be very interesting. I thought it was well written. I was captivated by the story. I like learning about life in biblical times. Like it's just so different. And I don't know, I haven't looked up how much research Anita Diamant did, but I found it to be very interesting to read. And I'm glad that I finally knocked off The Red Tent from my TBR. It has been on there for many, many years, and many of you have been recommending it to me for many, many years. So this qualifies for Historathon for the prompt of read a book that everybody has read except you. I feel like I'm the last one. And also a 3-word title. And also a book to movie adaptation, because there is a movie of The Red Tent. So this fits 3 of those prompts. Another book that fits those same 3 prompts is Water for Elephants by Sarah Gruen. This one was also highly recommended to me by so many of you, and unfortunately it was a big old miss for me. I really did not care for this book. I think I ended up giving it 2 stars. I did not like how graphic this book was. So in this book, we follow Jacob, who has basically nothing. His family has gone and he doesn't have a work. And so he hops on a train, ends up being a circus train. And so he joins the circus. I did not care for Jacob. And I think that's a big part of why I didn't like this book. I don't know if it was the circusy things that I didn't like, or if I just didn't care about Jacob. But also right near the beginning and throughout, But right at the beginning, there's a scene where Jacob is working in this tent where there's a strip show going on, and it is very graphic about this strip show. And I was like, whoa, that took me by surprise. I wasn't prepared for that. But then it continued throughout the book. There were multiple different scenes that were much more graphic than I prefer, that were of a sexual nature. And also there's some animal brutality in here, which I kind of expect, because I think that is kind of how things were run a lot of the times. And it's not glorified. Like, the man who is treating the animals in this way was definitely not liked by a lot of other people. But also the main relationship of this story is extramarital. So Jacob has an affair with one of the women who is on the circus, and their love story is possibly beautiful by some people, but to me, I just don't find that fun to read. I really just don't like reading about affairs. And so that was the main love story of this book, and I just didn't care for that either. So yeah, altogether, I'm glad that I read this, because again, it's a book that has been on my TBR for many, many years, but it was not a hit for me at all. Water for Elephants, 3-word title, book to movie adaptation, and a book everybody has read except for me. And I don't remember I know there was another prompt of a middle grade, but I cannot remember the 5th prompt right now. 3-word title, book to movie adaptation, a book everyone else has read, and something else. I don't know, but I did also read The Personal Librarian by Marie Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray. This is the story of Belle DaCosta Green, who was J.P. Morgan's personal librarian. She's also a Black woman passing as white. So she spent many years working in this field and earning a name for herself by building up the collection of J.P. Morgan's library, both of art and of ancient manuscripts. And she's incredibly brilliant in her field, and brazen and bold, and able to walk into a room full of art dealers and kind of own the room. Like, she was quite a remarkable woman, which is standout at this time. But then to also see this side of her where she is every single day walking on eggshells, afraid that someone is going to find her out. And we also learn about the reasons why she lives her life passing as white, and her family. And we just get into the background of that. And I really appreciated that perspective. I have read other books where a Black person, or woman in particular, passes as white, and I didn't feel that those books gave me as much background and helped me to have empathy and compassion and understanding as much as this one did. I really did appreciate that. There were a few parts towards the end that were a little on the slower side, that weren't quite as page turnery and compelling, and the action kind of slowed down a little bit. So there were definitely things that I really appreciated. However, it also wasn't a full-on 5-star book that I'm never going to forget. So I'm not going to tell you my final rating on this, because this is one of my NetGalley 5-star prediction books. So I will be talking about this very soon in that NetGalley wrap up of my 5-star predictions. So those are the 3 Historathon books that I read. I also have 3 books that I've already read for nonfiction November. So 2 of them were on my pile original 5 books I wanted to read, and then one is just kind of random. And this is one I started the month out with on the audiobook, and that is The Day the World Came to Town, 9/11 in Gander, Newfoundland by Jim DeFeed. I heard Katie from the Currently Reading podcast talk about this, but I was already listening to it when she talked about it, so I thought that was a pretty cool serendipitous moment. I really loved this story. When I read The Only Plane in the Sky earlier this year, a couple people have mentioned this book to me, and it's just about this town in Newfoundland, Canada, where many planes had to land who were traveling to the United States from overseas, because the airspace over America was shut down, and all American flights had to land at the nearest airport. And so Gander had a huge runway. It used to be a military stopover gas up point or something. I forget why it had such a big airport, but Gander had a huge airport or a big landing area. And so they took a handful of planes, maybe 20 planes. I forget how many planes exactly landed there. But we just learned about this town and how everyone in the town came together to host all of these people who were stranded, who could not make their way home, who were not able to get at their luggage. And this town provided places to sleep and food and companionship and washed laundry and all of these little details that the whole town came together to help these people that were on these planes. It was uplifting and heartwarming. It was just beautiful. I really, really loved this. And I just found out recently that the musical that is made from this book called Come From Away is coming here to Richmond in February or March. And I'm definitely going to try to go see it if I can, because it's just such a beautiful story. Love, love, love. Another nonfiction that I read that was on my list that I just think is so important, and this one did make me cry, and it's very moving and infuriating and just incredible. This is a memoir by Melba Patillo Beals. She is one of the Little Rock Nine, one of the 9 Black students who went to Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, when the Supreme Court passed a jurisdiction that segregation was no longer constitutional. However, the governor of Arkansas was like, no, we're not doing that. We like to keep things segregated. And so these students are not coming to this school. He put soldiers at the doors so these kids could not enter. The way that these kids were treated every single day for a school year was horrifying, jaw-dropping, unbelievable, that no adults stood up for them. Any student that tried to befriend them or be kind was quickly scared into not being kind to them. They were brutally attacked, mocked, thrown, like they had eggs and water and ink thrown at them, dynamite thrown at them. They had people walking on their heels to the point that they were bleeding. They had people hitting them, calling them names. In PE class, people would steal their clothes or put the water on scalding. It just was horrifying, day after day after day. And I just am blown away by Melba's story of how she survived that year. I cannot imagine being the parent of one of these 9 students and knowing that you're sending your child into this type of a war zone, but also having like a big picture view of why this is important. But these 9 students really, I mean, I can't imagine the therapy they've had to have since, because it just was horrifying. All the things that they had to experience. Embarrassing. It's embarrassing that grown adults who claim to be Christian, humans who claim to be humans, could treat other humans this way. It's embarrassing. It was horrifying. An important read for sure. I definitely cried quite a few times while reading this. I thought her story was remarkable. And towards the end, as she's reflecting back and sharing how she's able to cope with these memories and the experiences that she had and why it was important and how she had grown from it and what she had taken away from that time in her life was remarkable. Yeah, definitely a 5-star read. Whoo, boy, that was a doozy. Another nonfiction, the third nonfiction that I've already read this month is The Faithful Spy by John Hendricks. This is a true story of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who is a German theologian who was involved in a who was involved in a resistance group of religious leaders who had a plot to kill Hitler. Multiple plots to kill Hitler. This was told in such an interesting way. There are graphics and color. I mean, this color palette is like teal, red, and black and white. Very interesting to look at as I was reading. I also found it very interesting to have kind of this big picture view of how it is that Hitler came to power and how World War II even happened. Beginning with the Treaty of Versailles at the end of World War I and what that did to the German economy, and then how the Nazi Party slowly gained power from there. I also really appreciated Dietrich Bonhoeffer's moral dilemma that he was facing as far as knowing as a believer that killing is wrong, and yet in the time of war, is it okay to be involved in this plot to kill Hitler? I did wish for a little bit more personality, I guess. I mean, the style has a lot of personality, but the writing felt a little on the dry side. And so while parts of it were very interesting, it wasn't quite a 5-star. I only gave this one 4-star reads. I think it's worth the read, and I did find it very interesting. There were definitely things that I learned from this. I would be interested in reading more about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, but this one was a 4-star, not a 5-star. Very good, but not great. And then the final book that I have already completed this month is totally different from all those historical and kind of heavier reads. This was light and fluffy and fun and delightful, and I loved it. And it's a rom-com called If the Shoe Fits by Julie Murphy. Julie Murphy is the author of Dumplin'. This is a Cinderella-esque story. Our main character is Cindy, and she is a plus-size girl who has a stepmother and stepsisters. However, different from Cinderella, the stepmother and stepsisters in this story are very supportive and loving, which I really appreciated that kind of twist on Cinderella. Cindy's stepmother is the creator of a Bachelor type show, and Cindy ends up going on the show. So we have things that I love here: a Cinderella retelling, plus size rep, and a Bachelor type setting. So I absolutely loved this. I also really appreciated that the romance was super sweet, and it also was closed door. We did not go into the bedroom with anybody. There's actually very minimal sexy times at all. But it just was a sweet, fun, I kind of laughed out loud a couple times and just flew through this. It was just the lightness that I needed in the midst of all of those other slightly heavy books. Those are the 7 that I've already read, but I am also currently in the middle of Breath. Not in the middle. I'm really at the beginning. I don't know that I'm going to finish this before the end of the month. This is The New Science of a Lost Art by James Nestor, and it's really about different breathing practices. Well, I'm only on chapter 2. So I really loved the introduction as he described what he's going to talk about and how breathing has been used for centuries in different places to bring healing, to calm anxiety, to boost metabolism, to just bring health and renewed focus, to be used in all of these different ways that in our current culture, we don't really use them that often. We don't really use our breath that often. I mean, if you're involved in yoga, I think is one activity where breathing is a very strong part of that practice. But I'm just really excited to learn about some breathing techniques and practices from around the world. And then later today, I'm going to be starting The Lincoln Highway by Amor Towles. And I'm very, very excited to read that one. But that's what I'm currently reading. But these are the 7 books that I have already finished this month, and I think that it's been a great reading month so far. I would love to hear from you if you've read any of those. If any are going on your TBR, let me know. What is something that you have read already this month? Did you participate in Historathon or Nonfiction November? Are you taking part of that? Let's chat about all these things down in the comments below. That is it for me today. I appreciate you watching so much. It really means the world to me, and I'll be talking to you in another video very soon. Bye.